Chapter 91. You are listening at novel full.audio. If you can't understand, I'll give you time_1 translator. 549690339. His calm attitude made it hard for Ning Qing to imagine that a few hours ago, he was the one who had betrayed his promise and smiled gently and thoughtfully at another woman. She wanted to scream, curse, cry, and blame Shushu. However, what made her feel the most ridiculous was that she could not say anything. Seeing that she didn't speak for a long time, Nian Jing frowned. "What's wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" As he spoke, he wanted to feel her forehead. Ning Qing stepped back abruptly, avoiding the horrified expression of resistance, which made his face darken. Recalling how he had hung up on her earlier that day, Nian Lai explained to her patiently, "I was busy with work today. Lu Jue had my cell phone. I didn't pick up your call. I'm sorry. Don't be angry, okay?" Ning Qing laughed preposterously, tears forming in her eyes again. She used all her strength but still couldn't hold it in. "Nian Lai," she said resentfully, "do you lie so righteously now?" Ning Qing couldn't imagine how much mental fortitude he had to bear to act as if nothing had happened in front of her. Nian Jin stared at her pale face, his whole body trembling, and the gentleness in his eyes disappeared. "Ning Qing," he said hoarsely, his thin lips slightly pursed. "Don't call me that." Ning Qing pushed his hands away and shouted at him with red eyes, "You didn't even separate from her, why did you lie to me? Is it so fun to lie to me?" Ning Qing's voice was trembling. If one did not listen carefully, one would not be able to hear what she was saying. She smiled coldly, and the bitterness spread to her heart. The dull pain was hard to describe. "Nian Lai, when you saw me soften my attitude towards you and walk into your trap step by step, allowing you to deceive me and dismiss me with a few words, did you feel very proud? Aren't you disdainfully thinking that this woman is so easy to deceive?" Tears poured out like a flood, covering his entire face. He really made her feel that she was a fool who was easily manipulated and deceived by him. What a joke. She was actually feeling heartache for this cold and heartless man. Nian Lai was deeply hurt by her avoidance and the undisguised pain on her face. His lips opened and closed, and his hands were frozen in mid-air. After a long time, he retracted his hand and lowered his eyes. The warmth in his eyes disappeared and he became neither hot nor cold. Even his expression had turned cold. "Why did you have to say it?" he asked. Nian Lai looked down at her. His thick eyelashes were like feather fans, and the shadow fell on his eyes, making his whole body seem indifferent. "Ning Qing, if you don't tell us, we can pretend that nothing happened. Her return doesn't affect you and me. If you're willing to." Pa! A slap landed on his right cheek. A burning pain spread out. He looked over and saw Ning Qing staring at him with grief and indignation. She scolded him in disbelief, "Nian Lai, you're shameless." There was a trace of blood at the corner of the man's mouth, which showed how much strength she had used. Ning Qing's eyes stung, and she averted her gaze. The tip of Nian Lai's tongue touched his cheek. The color of blood, coupled with his slightly red face, added an invisible charm and evil. But it was even more terrifying. Ning Qing's fingers dug into her palms. She gritted her teeth. "I can't accept her. So, let's get a divorce, Nian Lai." "Divorce? Hee." With a cold smile on his face, Nian Lai took a step forward, grabbed her hand roughly, and dragged her upstairs. "What are you doing? Nian Lai, let me go." He turned a deaf ear to her and pulled her into the master bedroom on the second floor without any pity. "Remember, you have no right to mention the word divorce." After the cold warning, Nian Lai glared at the unconvinced woman and said coldly, "If you can't figure it out, I'll give you time. Young madam is in a bad mood and needs to calm down. Without my permission, she's not allowed to take a single step out of the room." The servant next to her didn't dare to breathe too loudly and could only respond. Ning Qing watched the door close. The sound of a lock falling was heard. She had no choice but to believe that Nian Lai had locked her up. A silent coldness spread everywhere. The woman's weak body could not take it anymore and fell down. Chapter 92. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. I thought Mrs. Nian had already reached the point of using the ruse of self-injury. 1. Translator 549690339. The morning light was a little dim. The cool light pierced through the clouds and spilled on the ground. The treetops on both sides of the road also hung velvet light. There were some drops of water on the green branches, which were as bright as pearls. In the study of Yunhuang No. 1, the light was not very bright, and the air was filled with smoke. On the large study table, the transparent ashtray was full of cigarette butts. When Lu Jue pushed the door open and entered, he almost vomited from the smoke. "Young master, I've already sent out the message," he said to the statue-like man sitting in front of him, holding back his nausea. "Yes." The man's voice was hoarse when he replied. It was obvious that he had been through a night of tobacco poisoning to have such a voice. "What about young madam?" Lu Jue couldn't help but ask. There were faint dark circles under his long and narrow eyes. The collar of his white shirt had been ripped open, and the first and second buttons were missing. His sleeves were folded up to his arms, and there were a few faint marks on his wheat-colored skin. "Get someone to keep an eye on her," he said in a hoarse voice. "Yes." Her eyelids drooped, and she closed her bloodshot eyes. The fatigue from staying up the whole night was finally released. "Get out." The door was closed. A long time passed. After Lu Jue brought him a change of clothes, he found a guest room to take a bath. After he was dressed, he was once again that cold, arrogant, and unrivaled man in the mirror. When she went downstairs, she passed by the master bedroom. The door was closed, and she couldn't see anything inside. He tried to restrain himself, but he still couldn't hold it in and asked, "How is she?" The maid on guard lowered her head in fear. "Young madam didn't eat anything last night or this morning. She's been sleeping the whole time. We tried to call her, but she didn't respond." A cold chill came from beside her. The maid trembled and a large palm reached out. "The key." The maid hurriedly took out the key and handed it to him. He inserted the key into the keyhole and turned the door handle. It was dark inside, and the suffocating air made Nian Lai frown. On the bed, that person did not move at all. He remembered that no one had noticed her when she was sick. He strode to the bed and pulled her shoulders over. His voice was filled with undetectable worry. "Ning Qing, why are you so angry?" Meeting the woman's dark eyes, Nian Lai's words were stuck in his throat. She stared at him, calm as ever. "I'm not dead yet." His cold eyes scanned her face. Other than her lips being a little pale, there was nothing different. "I thought that Mrs. Nian had already reached the point where she had to resort to self-injury, he said coldly after he steadied his breathing. "It's good that she's not dead." The needle pierced into his flesh, and the pain was excruciating. Ning Qing's pupils moved slightly, mechanical and numb. Dead? How could it be? Since you don't want to die, why don't you eat? Do you think you'll make my heart ache by doing this, or are you trying to threaten me to let you out? If not for the sarcasm in his words, Ning Qing would have thought that he was still concerned about her. The corners of her lips curled up slightly. Even without any makeup and with a pale face, she was still like an exquisite doll, so beautiful that it made one's heart tremble. "Don't worry," she said. "I won't think too much of myself, and I won't die." It wasn't easy for her to survive, and she even had Ning Su's share. How could she die so easily? She stared at him viciously as if he was her enemy, but she was smiling. "I will not die before we get divorced." Nian Lai's jaw clenched and he exerted more force. Her expression didn't change at all, and she just stared at him stubbornly, as if she were possessed. Powerlessness swept through his entire body. Nian, she let go of her and moved away from the bed. Since you think so, that's great. Chapter 93. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. You're so affectionate, I'm almost touched. _1 translator. 549690339. His voice was so cold that Ning Qing couldn't tell if he really wanted her to live or if he was just being sarcastic. Nian Lai retracted his gaze and glanced to the side. As Ning Qing cried out in surprise, he took away the only communication device in the room. Nian Lai, give it back to me. She stumbled out of bed, but her body, which had not eaten, did not have much strength. She twisted her foot and fell straight on him. Nian Lai held her phone and raised his wrist. Ning Qing glared at him. That's my phone. What are you doing? A man's superior height was an innate advantage. She couldn't reach him even if she tiptoed. She pounced on his chest and made a fuss. She gritted her teeth, her red face close to his. Nian Lai's eyes darkened. The next second, he sneered coldly, Mrs. Nian seduced me with her beauty just for a phone. Not bad. Ning Qing stopped and her face turned pale. Nian Lai didn't look at her. Instead, he passed his phone to Lu Jue, who was behind him. He then pushed her away. Don't think about it. No matter what you do, it's useless. Don't even think that anyone will let you out. No one will help you before you think it through. Ning Qing tried her best to steady herself. She watched the man's back as he left, and her eyes turned red. What do you want me to understand? She clenched the hem of her nightdress and resisted the urge to rush out of the door. She laughed and her tears fell. Do you want me to accept her and maintain this twisted relationship between the three of us, or do you want me to pretend that I don't know anything and continue to be your obedient and sensible wife? His throat trembled, and his words were unclear. But she was unable to suppress her sadness. Nian, she nodded, turning her face to the side. Her clear side profile was filled with coldness and impatience. You should know what you should think clearly. His ambiguous words still hurt her. Ning Qing laughed and cried at the same time, letting the blood in her heart flow and tears flowed down her cheeks. With one sentence, he had exposed his crown. You want to lock me up and tell me not to appear in front of you and her so that I won't disturb you two from expressing your love and affection for each other, right? That pair of clear eyes had already been dyed with a burning red. Nian Lai's back stiffened. The mockery on Ning Qing's lips deepened. You're so affectionate, even I'm touched. She turned the back of her hand to him and showed him the heart of eternity that he had given her. Her smile was bright and dazzling. You should give your unique love to her. I don't want it anymore. She would no longer believe his nauseating hypocrisy, not even a single one. He pulled off the ring and threw it. The pink diamond drew a parabola in the air and hit the man's stiff back, making a soft muffled sound. A suffocating feeling filled the entire space, and the air seemed to have stopped moving. After a long while, he indifferently said, think whatever you want. He turned around and left without any hesitation. The door lock fell, followed by the curve of Ning Qing's lips. The dull pain and discomfort silently penetrated her limbs, making her unable to stand still. Tears welled up in her eyes. She raised her hand to wipe them away and turned to look at the open wardrobe. Hanging inside were his shirt and suit, and her dress and suit. The beautiful moments from before were still vivid in her mind, and she had forgotten that he was a cold and heartless person by nature. What kind of expectations and hopes did she have for his Henin? He was just asking for it, he deserved it. Ning Qing walked over, took off all his clothes as if she was venting her anger, and threw them on the ground. Then, he felt dizzy. He covered his face and slid to his knees. Chapter 94. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Without your permission, who would dare to spread such rumors? Translator 549690339. Ning Qing had been locked up for a whole week. In the past week, she had not seen anyone else other than the servants who brought her meals. The sound of the car from downstairs was no longer heard. The maid who brought her food kept her mouth shut. No matter what she asked, she would not say a word. She knew that Nian Lai must have instructed her to do so. She could also guess that the reason he hadn't returned for so many days was because he had gone to see Bai Qingqing. However, what she did not know was that the man returned every day. His car was parked far away at the intersection, and he would walk back every time. She had thought that he wasn't around, but in fact, he was in the study in the bedroom next to hers. He had never returned late. Outside, the wind was blowing and the clouds were changing unpredictably. Her world was calm and numb, but it was as stable as ever. On the 8th day of Ning Qing's imprisonment, the people from the Nian family's old residence arrived. In the hall filled with an ancient fragrance, 2 rows of armchairs were placed opposite each other, and carved red wooden pillars were placed in one square. Rare herbs were planted in ancient blue and white porcelain pots, and every decoration around them was worth a city. Kneel down. The roar was so powerful that it broke the calm atmosphere in the hall. Nian Junting and Song Wan sat on the high mahogany chairs in front of the hall. With one hand on the armrest, his dignified face could not hide his anger. Nian Lai stood in the middle of the hall. His tall and slender body stood straight, and his handsome features were unruffled. I told you to kneel down. Nian Junting was infuriated by his arrogant attitude. The man closed his eyes and remained silent. You're so silly. Song Wan stood up and walked in front of Nian Junting. She held his hand and consoled him gently. Junting, don't be angry. You're not feeling well because you're angry. Just talk to our son. She turned around and frowned at Nian Shi. Jean, don't make your father angry. Let's talk it out. You're so angry. Before she could finish, Nian Yu bent his body and knelt down. Nian Junting's anger rose again. Nian Lai, he narrowed his eyes and said, are you going against me and your mother on purpose? The man who was kneeling on the ground had his back straight. Even though he was kneeling, the cold arrogance on his body had not faded. I wouldn't dare, Nian Lai said. Nian Junting looked at him. He could not hide the anger and gloominess in his eyes. He tilted his head to look at Song Wan. The woman's pretty face was already a little pale. He looked at his son in front of him and felt even more unhappy. Song Wan forced a smile. Che, don't be like this. Get up and talk. As she spoke, she went to help him up. I know you, Nian, she said. You don't have to pretend to care about me. This choice of words made Song Wan's heart ache. She turned around helplessly and looked at the man in the seat. Nian Junting's heart ached for her. He reached out and held her hand. She criticized Nian Lai harshly, you haven't been home for so long. You came back just to anger your mother. You're really my good son. The man lowered his eyes, his expression unclear. His tone was cold and distant. You wouldn't have called me back for no reason. If there's something, just say it. Nian Junting was about to get angry again, but Song Wan held the back of his hand and shook her head at him. He suppressed his anger and looked down at the man on the ground. He threw the newspaper on the table. What's going on? Explain it to me. The newspaper fell, and the first page was facing up. The huge title was written in red, and no one could have missed it. The innocent female star and the young master of the Nian family appeared at the hospital's gynecology department together. Insiders say that she's more than 2 months pregnant. What? Nian Yu glanced at her and said plainly, self-media writing nonsense. Nian Junting slammed his fist on the armrest. There's a limit to your lies. Who would dare to spread such a rumor in the southeast without your permission? Chapter 95. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Why is it that none of my children are worthy of your attention? Translator 549690339. He knew very well what his son was like. The Nian family was a big family. Who would dare to make up such rumors to defame him? The only possibility was that he had tacitly agreed to it. Otherwise, he would be the one who deliberately teased her. It's not a rumor. Before Nian Junting could think further, Nian Lai said calmly, I don't intend to hide it from you and mother. This is true. Bang! A blue and white porcelain teacup came crashing down, hitting Nian Lai's brow. In less than 3 seconds, blood gushed out like spring water, flowing down his prominent eyebrows, sliding over his eyelids, staining his eyelashes, and even flowing into his eyes. Luan, purr. The woman screamed, her usual gentleness and calmness completely gone. Song Wan rushed over. She was at a loss and did not know what to do. Does it hurt? Why is there so much blood? Oh my God, what is this for? Tears welled up in her eyes, but when she met Nian Lai's gaze, she froze. His dark eyes were deep, hiding thousands of emotions. It was as if he had nothing in his eyes. It was as if he couldn't even feel pain. Song Wan pursed her lips and could not say a word. Behind her, Nian Junting was furious. What did you just say? I dare you to say that again. Nian Lai didn't even look at Song Wan. Please move aside. The woman's body stiffened and she moved to the side. He looked at the man on the seat without any fear. His back was straight, and his voice was still indifferent. I said, the child in Ingluo's stomach is mine. I want her to give birth to it. Nian Junting's face was red with anger as he glared at the person on the ground. Are you crazy? She's just a third-rate actress. Her background, appearance, and character are not worthy of the Nian family at all. She's not worthy to be the mother of my grandson and granddaughter. Nian Lai suddenly smiled. There was no warmth in his dark eyes, but the words he said were extremely gentle and endearing. I'm willing to be with her, regardless of whether she's worthy or not. I only want her. Nian Junting was so angry that he couldn't breathe. He pointed at him angrily and said, you must be possessed. Old Lu, punish me with the family law. He shouted at his opponent with a deep voice. Monting, what are you doing? Song Wan was shocked and her face turned pale. If there's anything to say it properly, Ingluo. What did you say? Nian Junting roared. He could no longer suppress his anger. He suddenly got up. Look at his crazy appearance. He must have been bewitched by that woman. A red wooden ferrule was brought over by Butler Lu. A red tassel was hung on one side, and the handle was wrapped with hemp rope. It looked quite solemn and solemn. With the ferrule in front of him, Nian Junting walked to Nian Lai with his hands behind his back. He looked down at him and said coldly, your mother and I will never allow that woman to give birth to our child. You have to get rid of her as soon as possible. Don't ruin the Nian family's reputation, do you hear me? Nian Lai's smile was strange, and his words were absurd to the extreme. Why is it that none of my children are worthy of you and mother's attention? At the side, Song Wan was stunned. The panic on her face froze, and her eyes flashed with fear and complexity. Nian Shi's eyelids lifted, his perfect face slightly twisted, giving off a mysterious and strange look. He had a terrifying evil smile on his face, and his eyes were so penetrating that it made people panic. I wanted to marry Ning Qing back then, but you didn't allow it. Now, you want me to divorce her. Now, I plan to divorce her and be with Hanin, but you're still not happy. There was a terrifying undercurrent in his eyes, and his tone was neither soft nor heavy. Dad, Mom, what exactly do I have to do for you to be satisfied? Chapter 96. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. I must make this child stay. 1. Translator. 549690339. Song Wan's heart ached, and her well-maintained face was filled with deep pain. Chen, your father and I are doing this for your own good. She doesn't know anything now, but if she remembers something one day, do you think she will forgive you? Not to mention other things, just what happened to Ning Su was enough to make that woman want to die. Of course, she couldn't care less about her, but her son couldn't be dragged down by that woman. That's my business. Nian. She knelt on the ground, blood staining half of his face, unable to hide the demonic and gloomy look in his bones. Song Wan was exasperated at him for failing to live up to her expectations. She looked at him pitifully. You can't possibly fall in love with her again. Her sister's matter happened first, how can you be cowardly? She was so anxious that she couldn't continue. Nian Junting pushed Song Wan away. His expression was sinister and scary. His stern eyes did not look like he was looking at his own son. You haven't changed. Mother and I have raised you to this point. If you want to ruin your entire life on the Ning family, you should first see if we agree. Nian Shi's hands clenched into fists. He could no longer hold it in, and his bloodshot eyes were filled with killing intent. He, who had never shown any resentment, now had a face full of hatred and resentment. He said word by word, you never asked for my opinion when you killed my child. Nian Lai. The roar shook the sky. His thick and long eyelashes fluttered, covering the overwhelming darkness inside. This child, whether you want him or not, I must keep him, he said in low and hoarse voice. His voice wasn't loud, and it could be said to be calm. But it was this coldness that completely ignited the anger of others. Good, good. Nian Junting's voice trembled with anger. He grabbed the ruler from Butler Lu's hand and said, you are indeed Nian Lai. He was a man who had been through countless storms and had never experienced failure in his life, but he had experienced the taste of failure from the son he had raised. Nian Junting had never felt so aggrieved in his entire life. He would not allow anyone to challenge his authority. Even his son would be the same. 3 years ago, you fought with me because of the Ning family. Now, you're fighting for that actress. You've grown up and think that you're the only one in the Nian family to choose from, right? Nian Shi didn't move at all, like a statue. Other than the slight rise and fall of his chest, one couldn't feel his aura. Isn't there still the Year Lord? His eyes were looking down, and there was no focus in his eyes. You can let him inherit the Nian family. Nian Junting and Song Wan were dumbfounded by his sudden words. Luan. Seeing that he would not change his attitude even if he died, Nian Junting could not help it. He picked up the ruler and threw it behind him. The muffled sound was heavy, but Nian Yu didn't even blink. I'll ask you one last time. How are you going to deal with that woman and her child? Nian Junting asked fiercely. Are you going to admit your mistake or not? The wound on his brow bone was no longer bleeding, but the blood stained his brow, red to the point of turning black. Nian Lai closed his eyes and didn't say another word. Silent resistance was the most resolute. Nian Junting could no longer hold back. He grabbed the ruler and swung it at the man. On his back, shoulders, waist, and arms. He used all his strength in every area. Every time the pharaoh fell, a burning pain would spread from the wound. The pain spread. The pain was like a bayonet drilling into the flesh, turning over and over, penetrating deep into the bone marrow. It was so painful that his heart lost control and almost stopped. However, in the face of such torture, he only lowered his eyes and clenched his jaw, not making a single sound. And so, the whipping came again and again. It resounded throughout the hall. Chapter 97. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Why don't you just send her to the hospital? Translator. 549690339. The whipping sound continued for a long time. Nian Che, who was hiding outside the door, couldn't bear to listen any longer. He rushed in and shouted, "Stop fighting." Nian Junting and Song Wan looked over. Nian Che avoided their gazes and walked behind Nian Lai with hesitation. With just one glance, he didn't dare to look anymore. He turned his head away, his voice trembling. He was obviously afraid. "Stop fighting, something will happen if you continue." He deserved it. Nian Junting's chest heaved up and down, his breathing uneven, getting heavier and heavier. The ferrule in his hand, which was 2 fingers wide, was already stained with blood. It had cracked from the middle. The man on the ground was no longer as strong-willed as before. His body was bent like a bow, and his shirt was torn on the back. The wounds were mottled, and his skin and flesh were torn open. He was drenched in blood, making one's heart palpitate with fear at first sight. The air reeked of blood. The atmosphere in the hall was heavy and solemn. Nian Junting was still cold. "Are you going to admit your mistake or not?" Song Wan couldn't take it anymore. She turned her head away and cried. Nian Che looked at the man who was stubbornly refusing to say a word. He was angry, but his heart ached. He and his sister-in-law were still fine before, but suddenly there was a mistress and she was pregnant. It was one thing for her to be pregnant, but his brother insisted that she give birth to the child. Then what about his sister-in-law? Nian Yun knelt on one knee, tilted his head to look at him, and tried to persuade him, "Big brother, what's going on? I don't believe that you're really related to Ying Luo. Quickly explain yourself." Nian Che gritted his teeth and said, "Say something. Say that you have nothing to do with that woman and that her child is not yours. Say it." The man, who had not moved for a long time, turned his face slightly. His face was so pale that it was almost transparent, making Nian Che's heart tighten. Nian Lai's listless eyes looked at him. His thin lips were purple and white, but he didn't say a word. Nian Che clenched his fists tightly. The respect he had for him had completely disappeared from his usually clear and bright face. "Nian Che, move." A rather intimidating voice fell from above. Nian Che gritted his teeth, stood up, and backed away. Nian Junting didn't show any signs of heartache or reluctance. His cold gaze was locked on Nian Lai. "If you don't know what you did wrong, then just keep kneeling. When you've thought it through, you can come and find me." The ruler was thrown in front of him, and the figure in front of him walked away. "If he doesn't get it, then kneel until he does. This time, no one is allowed to plead for him." It hurt. It was a pain that burned like fire. There wasn't an intact piece of skin on his body. He was covered in purplish-red wounds that were bleeding non-stop. Nian Lai's ears were suddenly near and far, and he lost all his senses. His vision turned black and cold sweat dripped down his forehead. He didn't have any strength left to support himself. His pale lips moved and he said something. Then, his tall body swayed and fell to the ground. Night time, close to midnight. The night sky was dark, and the moon and stars were hidden behind the dark clouds. The whole city was in the dark, without a trace of light. On the road, a black luxury car was driving madly in one direction at the speed of a wild horse. Outside Yinshi No. 1, Lu Jue hurriedly got out of the car and opened the door. With heavy expressions, he and Nian Che helped the person in the back seat out of the car and into the manor. The servant was dumbfounded by their lineup. Nian Che's usual cheeky smile was nowhere to be seen. "Be careful." He yelled at the maid, "Don't touch him. Call the doctor." Only then did the people in the living room see the tragic state behind the man, and their faces turned pale. After helping him into the bedroom on the first floor, Nian Che and Lu Jue wiped the sweat off their foreheads as they looked at the terrible injuries on him. Lu Jue's face darkened. Second young master, why don't we just send eldest young master to the hospital? Chapter 98. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The young master has locked up the young madam. 1. Translator. 549690339. What's the use of sending it back? Nian Che's gaze was complicated. He recalled what his brother had told him before he lost consciousness. Send me back to Yunhuang number 1. He couldn't understand why he had to come back with such a serious injury. Other than his sister.in.law, who else could be the reason for his return? However, if that was the case, everything was wrong. It's a complete mess, a complete mess. Nian Che stuck his hands into his hair, fidgeting with his short hair in frustration as he paced back and forth. Where's my sister.in? Law, he asked. Lu Jue frowned. On the second floor. Go and call her down. This was the last time. If his brother was really a scumbag, he would be the first one to beat him up if he wanted to keep the house and the house safe. But now, he was afraid. Looking at the unconscious man, Nian Che couldn't help but compromise. However, Lu Jue didn't move. Nian Che looked at him and said, Why are you looking at me? Go and call for help. He had no patience at all. Lu Jue hesitated. Eldest young master has locked young madam up. He said that without his permission, no one is allowed to let her out. Nian Che stopped rubbing his short hair and asked in disbelief, What did you say? He must be crazy. What did his sister.in.law do to deserve such treatment? Lu Jue didn't dare to say much, and his words were vague. The rumors about the first master have been spreading like crazy recently. He's afraid that the young madam will be upset if she hears about it, so he's hesitating. So he locked her up. Nian Che thought it was ridiculous. Lu Jue lowered his head. Madam and eldest young master are getting a divorce. Eldest young master has no choice. Nian Che was so amused that he could not speak. For the first time, he felt that his brother was King B****. If he wasn't lying in bed with serious injuries, he would have really beaten him up. He glared at Nian Lai and turned back with a cold smile. I can't do anything if you don't let my sister.in.law come down. You can't expect us big men to take care of him. Why don't you let my sister.in.law take care of him? Can you take off his clothes? Lu Jue's mouth twitched. It was obvious that he was struggling. Nian Che raised his brows and said, he's the one who doesn't listen to us. If anything happens to him, no one will care. I've already done my best to send him home. You can do whatever you want. With that, he turned around and walked out. Second young master. Nian Che turned a deaf ear to her words and walked away briskly. Lu Jue had nothing to say. He glanced at the man on the bed and could only call for a servant to go upstairs and open the door to the master bedroom. The truth was that Ning Qing had been locked in her room, day and night reversed, and she had gone to bed early. It was only because of the commotion downstairs that she was woken up. When Lu Jue came in, she was standing by the bed, and there was no expression on her cold face. What's the matter? Lu Jue hesitated. In the end, he said, young master went to the old residence today. He's downstairs now. You can go down and take a look. Ning Qing's brows furrowed. She had wanted to refuse, but hearing his heavy tone, she couldn't bring herself to refuse. Thus, he walked out in silence. After a week, she finally stepped out of the door. She thought that she would have to wait for his final decision. However, he did not expect to see such a tragic scene. He was lying on the bed with his eyes closed and his brows furrowed. His face was pale and weak, and thick blood stained his entire back. The wounds had split open, some of which had dried up, but it could not block the strong smell of blood. She walked in and almost vomited. Shock filled her eyes, and Ning Qing's throat trembled. What's going on? Why is he injured like this? Chapter 99. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I can't bear your young master's deep affection. 1. Translator. 549690339. Lu Jue could see her heartache, but he didn't dare to say some words. It was the old master. She pursed her lips tightly and endured the pain in her heart. Ning Qing lowered her eyes and said coldly, "Why did you bring him back when he's so badly injured? Couldn't they just send him to the hospital?" Lu Jue was very honest. It was second young master's orders. Young master is unwilling to go to the hospital. Ning Qing clenched her fists and took a deep breath. That has nothing to do with me. I'm not a doctor. I can't treat his injuries. She turned around and was about to leave. Lu Jue quickly blocked her way. Young madam, please don't do this. Young master is doing this for you. Ning Qing felt that it was ironic. Could it be that he got together with Bai Qingqing for her? Lu Jue, don't put all the blame on me. I can't bear the deep love of your young master. He waved his hand and went upstairs. Lu Jue was anxious and helpless, but he could not do anything to Ning Qing. Seeing the footsteps go away, he sighed deeply and waited for the doctor to come. After a quick diagnosis, the doctor looked troubled. At first glance, it's just some superficial wounds. The wound on his forehead is a little deep, but it's been too long and there are signs of inflammation. Some wounds need to be stitched up. Furthermore, Sir is running a high fever. It's better to send him to the hospital. Lu Jue was extremely annoyed. He could only call for help and send Nian Lai to the hospital. However, before she could touch him, the unconscious man immediately opened his eyes that were burning with black flames. His unclear eyes were filled with destructive hatred. Get lost. Don't touch me. His aura was too strong, cold, and dark. Young master, Lu Jue said in a low voice, you're seriously injured. You must go to the hospital. The man's eyes were black and red. He gritted his teeth. I told you to get lost, Hua Hua. Get lost. He wanted to get up, but he was burned by the pain. He let out a muffled groan and fell back onto the bed. She only muttered, don't touch me, call her, I want her. Lu Jue held his breath and was about to go upstairs to invite Ning Qing in when the woman suddenly appeared beside him, her face cold. Young madam, Jinjin. Ning Qing's face was expressionless. She walked to the bed without a word and asked the doctor, he's not going to the hospital. Tell me. What should we do? This series of reversals stunned everyone in the room. Ning Qing did not have much patience and frowned. The doctor hurriedly said, Sir, your high fever is caused by the inflammation of your wound. Now, you have to clean the wound and sew up the deep wound. Then, you have to apply medicine and bandage it. After that, you have to hang up the anti-inflammatory medicine. Ning Qing nodded and looked at the clothes he was wearing. His white shirt had been completely dyed red by blood. As time passed, the color turned from red to black, exuding the smell of blood. It was as if he had been pulled out of a pool of blood. She took a few deep breaths, and under the doctor's guidance, she used a pair of scissors to cut open the piece of cloth that was not called clothes, revealing his back. The injuries that were already scary enough were now all displayed in front of everyone. Some people couldn't help but rush out to vomit. Ning Qing suppressed the pain in her chest and used disinfectant to wipe each wound bit by bit. Every time she moved, the man beneath her trembled. However, he didn't resist as fiercely as before. Instead, he silently endured it. It was already an hour later when the wounds were treated. Ning Qing straightened her sore neck and back, and her eyes happened to catch a glimpse of the trash can. The paper towels were full of blood. She didn't know that a person could still survive after losing so much blood. She wanted to laugh at him, but she couldn't. The doctor put Nian on an 4 drip and instructed him not to press on his wound before leaving. Lu Jue stood at the door and looked at the woman beside the bed. Ning Qing stood up and looked at him calmly. You take care of him. Ning Qing was about to leave. Lu Jue wanted to say something, but she suddenly stopped. She looked down and a large hand grabbed her wrist. Chapter 100. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. She was really cheap, so cheap that her heart ached for him. 1. Translator 549690339. Ning Qing was displeased and wanted to push his hand away. However, it was of no use. She struggled with all her might, but the man's painful moans made her stop. Ning Qing held back her temper and glared at him coldly. Nian, stop pretending. Let go of me. He didn't move. Only his palm held her hand tightly, like a chain, not letting her escape. Ning Qing took a deep breath. Her mind was filled with his cold and ruthless appearance a few days ago. Ignore the suffocating pain in my heart and break it open with all my might. Young madam, please don't do this. You'll tear young master's wound. A cold gaze flew over. Lu Jue's eyes flickered as he tried his best to speak with reason. Young master doesn't allow others to get close to him, so please don't make things difficult for me. I can only trouble you to take care of him tonight. Ning Qing was conflicted. Why? Just because you're the young madam of the Nian family, young master's wife who hasn't divorced yet. The words that Lu Jue blurted out almost broke Ning Qing's defense. They were not divorced yet. NBSP, Ning Qing swallowed the bitterness in her throat and lost the desire to argue with him. She said, you can go. I'll take care of him. Then, she turned around and sat on the edge of the bed. Lu Jue could tell that Ning Qing's dislike for Nian was not as much as she appeared to be. In fact, she couldn't help but feel sorry for Ing Luo. The spectators saw it clearly. He knew. Thus, he left with a peace of mind. Everyone retreated, leaving only the two of them. The room was so quiet that only his heavy breathing could be heard. Ning Qing looked at his face. Because of his fever, his forehead was covered in sweat. In order to avoid infection, the wound on his brow bone had not been bandaged. She looked at the protruding wound. The flesh and blood were exposed, and the bone could be seen. A trace of pain wrapped around Ning Qing's heart. She held her breath and was really out of breath. After a long time, her struggling white fingertips fell on the side of the man's face. It was gentle and tender. Ning Qing wiped his sweat and finally laughed bitterly. She was really cheap. She felt so bad for him. She was muddle-headed and unconscious. His whole body was in so much pain that he felt like he had just taken a trip to hell. He used all his strength to open his heavy eyelids. Nian panted heavily, his heart clenched. His black pupils reflected the color of the ceiling. He suddenly got up, and the strange feeling in his hand made him turn his head. The woman was lying on the edge of the bed, her slender and white wrist in his hand. She was kneeling on the ground in a very strange posture, sleeping well. Suddenly, his heart was filled. Ning Qing was not in a deep sleep. He had been sweating all over last night, and he had tormented her for most of the night. She had just fallen asleep when she heard his movements again. She just didn't expect to see his tender eyes when she opened her eyes. Then, the wind and clouds dispersed, and the clouds became light. There were no waves or waves. Nian pursed his dry lips. What are you doing here? I'll take care of you. Ning Qing moved her sore body and stood up straight. Don't be so angry. You're the one who didn't let me get close to you, so Lu Jue asked me to come. Nian's lips parted. That wasn't what he wanted to say. Ning Qing rubbed her shoulders, her tired face unusually calm. Can you let me go? Nian Lai held her hand for the entire night. His entire hand was curled up. Now that he wanted to let go, his hand was sore and numb. However, he understood that he had no reason to keep her. Her dejection was hidden under her eyelids, and no one noticed it. Ning Qin was very impatient. "I'll call the doctor." "Let go." The next second, the warm temperature on her wrist disappeared. She put her hands behind her back and turned to leave. She could not face him when he was awake. Countless emotions accumulated in his chest, and the pain in his body could not compare to his indescribable feelings. His eyes flickered intensely as he stared at her back as she left. No matter how hard he tried to restrain himself, he could not. "Ning Qin," Nian Lai suddenly called out to her.